Hey guys, welcome to quiz number 13. If you happen to be new here, this is the series where you guys analyze 3 different positions, come up with what moves you think are the best, and then we talk about the results in this video. As always, feel free to pause the video as we go along if you'd like to solve the positions. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here's position number 1. If you want to pause the video, figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that now. I'll give you a second or two. And if you're ready to see the solution, here we go. All right, so from the 0 to 1,000 group of players, we had top move being rook to g5 check. Then we had knight to d2 and bishop to d3. 1,000 to 1,600 group, again, we had top move rook g5. And then we had f3 and bishop takes d5 as the second and third moves. And then above 1,600, the only move that people wanted to play was rook to g5 check. All right, so this position was meant to be an easy one, so I'm not surprised that most people found the right move. I wanted to start doing the first position to be a little bit easier because I did have quite a few people complaining that when I bumped up the difficulty, they got a little bit too hard. And so I think a good compromise is having the first position be easy, and then the next two can be a little more difficult. So this one was meant to be pretty easy, but black obviously has this fork attacking your queen and your rook. And the big takeaway from this position is that whenever one of your pieces is being attacked, whether it's your king or your queen or whatever, you don't always have to move that piece. This is something that a lot of beginners have a hard time with. They think that, oh, if a piece is attacked, then I just need to move it out of the way, right? But what you learn as you gain experience is that no, you don't always have to move. You can either capture the piece that's attacking you, you can block it, or in the case like this, when it's a queen, you can actually do some other move that creates a higher threat, or that creates a bigger threat than what you're dealing with. So in this example, rook g5 check is a perfect move because you're creating a bigger threat on your opponent's king than what they have on your queen. And at the same time, you're creating a double attack now so that you can simply, after the king moves, you can just take the bishop, right? And eliminate the threat that way. So that was the idea. Pretty much everyone saw that. Just real quickly, I'll talk about the alternate moves. So, something like knight d2, kind of counterattacking the queen. The problem is that after black takes your queen, yes, you can take their queen, but then they're going to be able to take your rook with their bishop, and you just end up losing a rook, which is really not good. And so that's why that didn't work. Same idea with something like bishop to d3. Again, they're going to take your queen and then also get the rook at the end of it. So you can't really do that. Let's see what the other moves were. Bishop takes d5. Kind of have the same problem. Captures, and then you lose the rook. Now you did get an extra piece, so it's not as bad, but it's still not good. And then the other move, I think f3, some people said, trying to block the bishop. There's a couple problems with this. Number one is black could just take the rook, and if you try to recapture the queen, well, then they're going to take your queen, and you still come out losing. And then the other move that's actually not good for you is just queen takes e3 is really good for black, and your king's kind of in trouble here. And you still have the rook hanging at the end of everything. So only move really that was good for white in this position was rook to g5 and just picking up the bishop. So congratulations if you saw that. Let's go on to position number 2 where it gets a little bit more tricky. All right, here's position number 2. It's white to play. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that. I'll just give you a couple seconds. And if you're ready to see the solutions, here we go. So 0 to 1,000, we had a top move of bishop to h7 check. And then we had queen takes f6 and then rook takes f6. Then 1,000 to 1,600, we had the same 3 moves, but the order was a little bit different. Players wanted queen takes f6 was the top move, then bishop to h7 check, and then rook takes f6. And then 1,600 and above was the same 3 moves here. Queen takes f6, then bishop h7 check, and then rook takes f6. All right, so this position, it's clear that white has a nice attack going on black's king. You got the rook over here, which has kind of opened up the h-file. You've got the bishop and queen battery lined up here, which is very dangerous. You also have this bishop helping out. There is a little bit of counterplay for black here where this pawn is hanging, but after black captures that, you slide the king over and black doesn't really have much. So the big question in this position is, how do you proceed with the attack for white? What's the best way to go about doing it? And most people seem to think that queen takes f6 or bishop h7 check were the best ways, and then we saw a couple people with saying rook takes f6. So I'm going to start by talking about why rook takes f6 is not good, and then we'll come back and talk about queen takes f6 and bishop h7 check. So first of all, the idea behind this move looks pretty good because you're trying to remove the knight, and if black recaptures, you're going to take with the queen, and you get this pretty nice looking, attack on black's king. Now, one issue with this line is that black can actually play queen takes f2 check. You have to move over. And now a move that I'm guessing not very many people would have considered, queen takes b2. And basically black is sacrificing the queen, prevents the checkmate because now there's no more threat there. And when you take the queen, they just take this bishop, and so they've eliminated your attack. Now you do have the queen, but if we check, you know, a rook and a rook and a knight, black actually has a rook and 2 bishops for a queen, which is really good. If you remember my video on 3 pieces against the queen, a lot of times even 3 minor pieces, so like 2 bishops and a knight against the queen, a lot of times the pieces are going to be better. Well, 2 bishops and a rook is even better. And so black's actually ahead in this position. Now they have to be careful because their king is a little bit exposed, but they have enough pieces that they should be able to defend no problem. So, you know, that's one reason why rook takes f6 wasn't that good. But also, even right here, black doesn't have to take the rook to begin with, right? And one of the better moves that they could have done is just sacrifice on d3, and after you take, well, then they can take, and now your attack is not nearly as good, and you're down material, and black's actually just winning here. So that was the issue with rook takes f6. All right, so going back, the way that you actually broke through here was with queen takes f6. And the point is that you're immediately threatening checkmate. Now, yes, black can put you in check, but then you can just slide your king over. And now if they try to, you know, sacrifice the queen like before, for one, you could just take it and you're not down as much material as before. But an even better option is there's actually mate in 3. You can go check, bring the queen back, check, and then after the king goes over, you have mate. So that idea of, you know, going here, sacrificing the queen to try to survive a different way doesn't even work. So that's one thing. The other, you know, obvious option here is that if they take you, well, now you capture with the bishop, and this checkmate threat on h8 is unstoppable. Black, the only thing black can do is delay the game a few moves by throwing in some random checks with the queen. So check, you move, they can, like, you know, sacrifice with check, but and then there's nothing to stop that. Right, this is happening regardless. This is the opera mate, I believe, where you got the queen and bishop lined up like this. So it's one of the mating patterns that we looked at recently. So it's a good one to remember. But that was kind of the idea behind this position. Now let's go back and talk about bishop check here. So bishop h7 check is a nice move because it is a forcing move. It's check, and obviously black cannot take because you've got the immediate checkmate. So what it does is it forces the king over, and then you can. You have the discovered check, so if you want, you can put this bishop really anywhere on this diagonal. Like we can even come all the way back to b1 if we wanted. Again, you know, we still have this move to end the game if black tried to take our rook, so they would have to go back. And then we can do the same thing, and essentially we've got a free move of moving our bishop back here, which really doesn't matter. We didn't need to. It didn't really accomplish anything. We already had a winning idea. But if you wanted to play that first, you could. But, you know, it didn't really accomplish much. So, you know, the main point was just that you sacrifice the queen here. And then this was the unstoppable idea. So congratulations if you saw queen takes f6. And it just kind of goes to show the power of when you have bishops lined up on the king and you can get one, or in this case, 2 heavy pieces involved, like a queen or a rook. Very, very difficult for the opponent to prevent those kind of attacks. All right, here's position number 3. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that. And if you're ready to see the solution, here we go. All right, so the 0 to 1000 group wanted to play bishop to f5 check, and then king g2, and then rook e to e3. 1000 to 1600 group also wanted to play the same 3 moves, so bishop f5, king g2, and rook e to e3. And then 1600 and above, again, bishop f5 check, and then instead of king g2, we had rook e to e3, and then the third move was king to g2. So everybody pretty much suggesting the same 3 moves, and all 3 groups wanting to play bishop f5 check as the top move. All right, so I wanted to throw this position at you guys because I think a lot of times you get into situations like this where you're playing the game, something didn't go right. Obviously, white somehow lost their queen, and you're losing. But if you can find a nice sort of defensive move, a lot of times you can stay in the game longer and really give your opponent a lot of chances to mess up and make a comeback. So that's kind of what was going on here. You know, black is definitely better. They have the queen for the rook and a bishop. But, you know, a rook and a bishop is not terrible if you can create some nice sort of like fortress positions. And white's already doing a nice job with the bishop and pawn here. Bishop's defending the pawn, pawn's defending the bishop. It's very annoying, keeping black's king kind of at bay. If a rook can get involved, it could be dangerous. for black. But the big issue for white in this position is the move rook h8 coming next, right? Because once the rook and queen are ready to come down here, you're probably just going to get checkmated, right? So the issue was you really had to figure out if there was a way to kind of prevent that. Now, let's talk about this move that everybody wanted to play, bishop f5 check. This was kind of a little trick here, and most people went for it, but it almost looks like a cool move because it's like, okay, I'm going to lose my bishop, but after that, I'm going to get a rook because the king's going to have to take, and, you know, sorry, bishop for rook, that's pretty good, right? The problem, and I think most people maybe didn't analyze far enough into this, but takes, check, yes, you do create the discovered attack, and yes, you can capture the rook for free, but black now has knight f3 check, and if you want to save your rook so that the knight just doesn't get it for free, you have to go over here so that you can take the knight. But black doesn't take it right away. They play queen check first, and then after you move your king, they take it with the knight for free, and so you actually end up losing there. You don't really gain anything. That whole trade, you kind of just lost yourself a bishop, and so now black just has a queen for the rook, which is much better for black. So that's why bishop takes, or bishop to f5 was not a good move. Now, the other thing that some people said was king to g2. So the issue with king to g2 is, yes, you're going to go here next move if you can and gain control of this file. Problem is black's not going to let you do that. They're going to play here. And now you can't go there. They just take it, right? So what are you going to do to stop this? The answer is you can't do anything. You can't use this rook. It just gets captured. Like I talked about, you can't use that rook. And so you can sacrifice some bishops and do some random checks to delay the game for a few more moves, but you're going to get mated because of this this battery here. It's just too strong. So the people who said rook e to e3 were correct. This was the only good move to keep you in the game. And the reason is you're lining up the rook so that you can go to h3 pretty much no matter what. Like now, if black goes here, which is still the best move for black, but now you can go there. And if, you know, if black takes, you're just getting queen for 2 rooks. Best thing that black could do is take here first with check. And then after you block with this rook, then they can sacrifice. You get this position where you have the bishop pair against the rook and a knight. Okay, so it's definitely still better for black, but not as much as before. Now you can play bishop b4, kind of defending everything, and you can still come back from this position, right? You live to fight another day, and if black makes a mistake somewhere along the line, who knows what might happen. So that rook e to e3 move was really what you had to find because it was the only way to deal with these incoming threats. So that's what I wanted to see if you found. A lot of people did get thrown off by the bishop f5 move, just didn't work. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed those positions this week and learned a thing or two. As always, if you want to participate in next week's quiz, there's a link in the description below. You can check that out down there. I also put a link to the new Patreon page that I just created down there. So if you haven't checked that out, you can do that if you want to help support the channel. I'm trying to transition to be able to do this full time, and I'm just not quite there yet. So that's one way you can help if you're interested. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.